All right, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium. It's Wednesday, November 19th. I'm doing this a day early because I'm anticipating kind of a clogged schedule tomorrow on Thursday and again on Friday. And I wanted to make sure and get this one out there. This is, I think, another important story. There's been yet another bankster suicide, although they're not calling it a suicide. And in fact, this is one where it's fairly clear that there's not only murder, but this one is also something that gives us a lot of clues. So let me read this story to you. This was broken on Zero Hedge, and I'll try and remember to put up the link for you. And I'm going to read you exactly what the Zero Hedge article, all of the Zero Hedge article says. The dust has barely settled on the latest high profile banker suicide in which Deutsche Bank's Associate General Counsel and former SEC regulator Charlie Gambino was found dead, having hung himself by the neck from a stairway banister. And here comes the latest sad entrance in in the Dead Banker Chronicles of 2014, when earlier today the Post reports a Citigroup banker was found dead with his throat slashed in the bathtub of his quote swanky downtown apartment, authorities said Wednesday, unquote. And here's more. Shawn D. Miller, Citigroup's Managing Director of Environmental and Social Risk Management, was discovered around 3 p.m. Tuesday by a doorman in the Greenwich Street building. Law enforcement sources said, quote, "We are deeply saddened by this news and our thoughts are with Shawn's family at this time," unquote, said a statement sent out by Citigroup. Bloomberg adds that, quote, "A 42-year-old man was found unconscious yesterday in the bathtub of his Greenwich Street apartment in Lower Manhattan with a neck laceration. In other words, his throat was slashed, and later pronounced dead," the New York Police Department said in a statement. Medics declared him dead after responding to an emergency call about 3:11 p.m., and an investigation determined the cause of death is continuing, police said. In other words, it's a police investigation. What that just says is they're investigating a murder, and here's why. Miller advised executives and clients on sustainability matters, including environmental and social policies relating to industries including mining and renewable energy. According to his LinkedIn profile, he helped oversee the development and implementation of policies in more than 100 countries. "We are deeply saddened by this news, and our thoughts are with Shawn's family at this time," Danielle Romero Apsilos, a spokeswoman for the New York based bank, told Bloomberg in an emailed statement. However, unlike more previous clear cut suicides, this time there may have been foul play. The Post adds that, quote, "There was no knife recovered at the scene, leading officials to suspect the death was not a suicide, and they were trying to determine who had access to his apartment." Miller did well. One-bedroom apartments at the building are listed at more than $1 million. An online profile under the man's name calls him a pioneer in sustainable finance and a specialist in emerging markets at the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank. Several former colleagues told the Post that Miller was well liked. It was unclear why the doorman checked his apartment, unquote. And that's the Zero Hedge article. But in the Zero Hedge article, they also link Mr. Miller's LinkedIn profile. And there are some here that I want to draw your attention to. The second one at the top reads Managing Director and Global Head of Environmental and Social Risk Management. And this is for Citigroup. But if you read it, here's what it says. Part of his work was to ranging from project finance to capital markets, bonds and IPOs, in a wide variety of industry sectors: oil and gas, mining, infrastructure, power, cement, renewable energy, in addition to thematic areas such as sustainable forestry and client transaction related aspects of human rights. Then, further down, there's a listing for social development specialist for the International Finance Corporation. And in that paragraph, it states that the projects that he reviewed included industries, again, such as oil and gas, mining, hydropower, agribusiness, and forestry, unquote. So now let's look what we have. We have a dead banker, obviously murdered, who in his work for Citigroup and the International Finance Corporation, which is a part of the World Bank, was doing work directly related to mining. Now let's stop and look at that. We've seen stories over the past 2 to 3 years, various countries trying to repatriate their gold, Germany being the premier country that was unable to get its gold back from the New York Federal Reserve. So, in other words, this suggests to me that he may have found out something about the actual amounts of gold in the world, which, in my hypothesis, if you've been following my blogs, reading my books, my hypothesis has been that this amount is badly obfuscated and that there may actually be a lot more gold in existence than official guesses or estimates take into consideration. And I believe, if you've been following my work, that this has been part of a hidden system of finance. So, in other words, mining here is important. This would have given him access to accurate figures on perhaps the amounts of different kinds of bullion, gold, silver, perhaps heavy metals, iridium, platinum, osmium, and so on, those types of metals. This would have given him some key insight. Then the other thing you'll notice is that he was in the bond market. So again, that tips me off that in my speculation, in my hypotheses, I've been arguing that there is a hidden system of finance, one that is much deeper than black budgets, and that in part this depends on a hidden bond market specializing in off the books types of securities that are sold to a select few. And my basis for that was the research of Sterling and Peggy Seagrave in their excellent book called Gold Warriors, where they talk about the 57 bonds scheme of Japanese Premier uh, Tanaka back in the 70s and 80s. You recall what that was. Tanaka had a new kind of bond that looked nothing like any type of sovereign security Japan had issued before. And this was issued by the finance ministry, but with deliberate mistakes. So that when these bonds were sold, and they were sold on a market completely separate and off the books, it was not an open sale of these bonds. All right, so in other words, that implies a hidden market. These bonds were sold, and then because of the flaws, the Japanese Ministry of Finance in Tanaka's government could later claim that they were all counterfeit and forgeries. So, in other words, it was a scheme, really, to defraud the very rich. Now, what makes me think that maybe Mr. Miller was tied or discovered something like that was number one, his involvement in mining, his knowledge of mining, and number two, his knowledge of bonds. So he may have, and this is pure speculation, folks, he may have come across something that indicated some outline of this hidden system of finance, and therefore he had to be eliminated. Now, let's look at one final comment that I think is very significant in this man's LinkedIn profile of his background, his accomplishments, and that was his listing for social development specialist for the International Finance Corporation, again part of the World Bank. And recall in that listing, he states that he was involved with renewable energies, oil and gas mining, hydropower, agribusiness. Now, agribusiness is the nice term for companies like Syngenta, Monsanto, DuPont, Dow, all of the major corporations that are involved in what? They're involved in GMOs. So, in other words, you look at this guy and his resume, and he's got a finger in every financial pie that we've been talking about on the website: bonds, hidden systems of finance, mining, bullion, therefore. And earlier we talked about renewable energy, and that means he would have been familiar with new technologies. He probably was tracking some of the stories about fusion technology and so on. So this guy has his hands. This is a really interesting thing. This guy has his hands, his fingers, in every significant pie that either is part of the current system of finance in the West, or he has a finger in a pie that could significantly alter the economic structure and financial system of the West with new technologies or with agribusiness and so on and so forth. So, this, I think, may be the first big break that we've had in this curious story of dead bankers being murdered or committing suicide in a variety of very bizarre ways. We saw one clue earlier with Richard Talley. Remember that he's the fellow that supposedly committed suicide with a nail gun, and his business was mortgage titles. In other words, he cleared and researched mortgage titles. And if you've been following the work of former Assistant Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts of Housing and Urban Development, she came across massive amounts of mortgage fraud during her period as Assistant Secretary at Housing and Urban Development. And on that basis, she posited that this fraud was really being run for the purpose of a hidden system of finance and black budgets. So now we have, I think, another banker, dead, obviously murdered. That is a significant clue to a very, very big picture. Now, I want to add one final thing just as a note of caution here. I think we have to be very careful of saying that the bankers themselves are eliminating these people, because remember what one of the key implications of setting up the hidden system of finance in the post war period was. As I've pointed out many times, when Truman set this up in 1947, that meant that he put the intelligence apparatus of the United States directly into the banking business. So, in other words, these suicides, these quote unquote suicides, and now clearly a murder, may not be being ordered by bankers themselves. This may be coming from somewhere else completely outside of the banking community. And my suspicion is that it's coming from the world of intelligence, where knowledge of someone like this, with his fingers in all these pies, he may have been able to construct a much clearer picture than what we've been trying to guess at here on the website. So, an important story, one definitely to look at and follow. This guy, Shawn D. Miller, again, dead, obviously murdered, and this is one to pay attention to. Hopefully, the news will continue to track the story. That's it for an early news and views from the Nefarium on Wednesday, November 19th, everybody. God bless, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Bye bye.